Natacha de Krombrugge was a young lawyer living in Linkebeek, Belgium, who worked for 4 years at the German-based insurance company Allianz after completing law school. Natacha had a love for traveling and exploration, and in 2022 decided to take a 6-month trip across Latin America. She began by flying to Peru on January 1st, and over the next few weeks visited many of the country's landmarks, including Machu Picchu. On January 20th, she celebrated her 28th birthday on the shores of Lake Titicaca. That day, she called her parents to let them know her upcoming plans. She was to go on a 5-day trek through the Colca Canyon, the second deepest canyon in the world, then rest for a few days before flying to Colombia on February 4th. The route Natacha was taking for her trek started in the village of Cabanacandi, where she would head northwest towards Yahuar, meeting with 2 of her friends along the way. She would then head eastward to San Juan de Chuco before arriving back in Cabanacandi. On January 23rd at 3:23 p.m., Natacha arrived at Cabanacandi by bus. She soon arrived at a hostel called Pachamama Home, where she was captured on their security camera. She asked the employees about accommodations, and they suggested she stay at a cheaper hostel nearby called Mirko's House. From 4 to 5 p.m., the Polar Steps app on Natacha's phone revealed she walked to the Calimarca ruins just southeast of Cabanacandi. At 5:30, she made her way to Mirko's house to try to get a room, only to find it was closed due to COVID restrictions. However, the owner recommended another hostel in the area, La Estancia. She arrived at about 8 p.m. and was finally able to secure a room. After leaving her bags in her room, she went to a local restaurant for dinner before coming back at 11 p.m. She asked an employee if she'd be able to leave her large travel bag at the hostel while she was out on her trek. The next morning at 5 a.m., Natacha was seen leaving the hostel without eating breakfast, carrying a small backpack. About an hour and a half later, 2 people saw Natacha hiking near the Mirador de San Miguel on the path towards San Juan de Chuco, in the opposite direction of where she planned to meet her friends towards Yahuar. These 2 people were the last to see Natacha before she disappeared. As the days dragged on and Natacha's friends still hadn't heard from her, they began frantically contacting several people, including hostel employees, local tourists, and the police. They also posted to social media to spread awareness of her disappearance. Search parties began combing through the Colca Canyon for any sign of Natacha, and police recovered her travel bag left at La Estancia. Back in Belgium, Natacha's parents Eric and Sabine filed a missing persons report for their daughter, and the Belgian police launched their own investigation, searching her flat and interviewing her peers. On February 6th, Eric and Sabine, their son Tanguy, and Belgian investigators took a flight to Peru to help with the search. Natacha's disappearance started gaining worldwide attention as the scope of the search continued to broaden. A massive 3-week search operation was launched spanning Cabanacandi, consisting of 70 police officers, a track dog, and a drone. Concurrently, police were also investigating the disappearance of 14-year-old Kevin Ramos, a Peruvian teenager who went missing almost the exact same time as Natacha. Witnesses saw him fall from a bridge into the Colca River on January 25th, and since then, no trace of him has ever been found. On February 26th, Natacha's family and the Belgian investigators flew back to Belgium as the search in Peru continued. The next day, friends and relatives created the support group Looking for Natacha to spread further information about her disappearance. Around this time, it was announced that La Estancia, the hostel that Natacha stayed at, was closing down due to operating without a license. However, investigation of the building in relation to the case would continue. On March 7th, heavy rain and seismic activity near the Colca Canyon temporarily halted the search. Police would go on to state that they didn't believe Natacha's disappearance to be the result of a homicide due to no traces of her blood being found. Natacha had been missing for over 2 months and the investigation was left at a standstill, so her parents decided to fly back to Peru in early April. By this point, the police had searched 92% of the canyon. The Colca River had remained unsearched because the water levels were too high, so they had to wait a few months for the water to lower. In the meantime, Eric and Sabine would continue investigating on their own. They asked many locals and witnesses for information, hung up posters all around Cabanacandi, continued searching through the Colca Canyon, and announced a $15,000 reward for helping find their daughter. After lobbying for the help of homicide investigators, Natacha's parents met with the commander of Peru's Directorate of Criminal Investigation, who agreed to take over the investigation starting in mid-June. A few weeks later, a false lead cropped up when bodily fluids were found at the hostel Natacha stayed in. Lab results later determined the fluids had no relation to Natacha's case. For 4 months, officers launched several investigations that involved interviewing witnesses and dispelling rumors, but once again made little progress. Eric and Sabine took a few months off to return to Belgium for family-related matters before coming back to Peru on September 11th. In a meeting with Lima police, they learned that a 20-kilometer stretch of the Colca River had yet to be searched. They organized an expedition to search this area between the 19th and 21st of September. On the 16th, 3 fishermen in the Colca River came across a human skeleton on the riverbank, with its skull wedged in between 2 large rocks. It wasn't until 5 days later that they reported their discovery to authorities. Over a dozen people were sent to remove the skeleton from the canyon, which was sent to a morgue for identification. Eric and Sabine later visited the morgue and recognized one of Natacha's earrings that was recovered at the site. On October 6th, the remains were officially identified as those of Natacha de Kronbrugge, over 8 months since she had gone missing. Initially, police were uncertain about her cause of death. The initial autopsy revealed that the 28-year-old had died from being struck in the head, which presented the possibility of foul play. However, after further testing, police later stated that Natacha's death was an accident. It's believed that she fell from one of the bridges over the Colca River, similar to Kevin Ramos, and the impact with the water is what caused her head injury. Her body was then carried 3 kilometers downstream, resulting in more injuries, before her head became stuck in between the rocks. Once her remains were identified, Natacha's parents rewarded the 3 fishermen who found her with the $15,000 they promised. On November 21st, Natacha's parents were finally able to return her body to Belgium, where she was given a proper tribute on the 30th. 2 plaques were also created in her honor, one in her hometown in Belgium, the other where her hike started near Cabanatundi. The locals in Peru that placed the plaque stated, "Now she protects all the hikers and looks out over the canyon. She'll live forever in our valley, and her smile will brighten the lives of our visitors."